Welcome to the online version of the Request for Payment workshop. The following slides will give the viewer an overview of the process for submitting requests for reimbursement of allowable expenses incurred by subgrantees in the course of administering their project. The RFP documents referenced in this presentation are available at www.scdps.gov/ohsjp/oag.asp. This slide shows the accounting grant staff contact information. During the presentation, I will give an overview of the following RFP categories and how you can submit RFPs to accounting grants.
Please note that RFPs will be processed only with adequate documentation of receipts and invoices. Items without adequate documentation will be removed from the RFP and may be submitted with the next scheduled RFP. Special consideration will be given to the processing of RFPs with questions regarding salary and fringe benefits documentation. Any changes due to math errors or inadequate documentation will be emailed to the subrecipient with a cover sheet documenting any missing elements or corrections after the altered payment has been approved and scanned for payment.
Claims for reimbursement must be submitted no more frequently than once per month and no less frequently than once per quarter. Grant projects failing to meet this requirement without prior approval from the SFA are subject to cancellation. Travel cost must be consistent with your agency's policies and procedures. In the absence of policies, or if state policy is more restrictive, follow state policy. Travel per diem. Follow agency policy up to state limits for South Carolina. Please refer to the RFP detail budget category travel, page 5. The travel support document must be completed and submitted with the RFP.
Travel category mileage. Follow your agency's policy until it hits the state limits. Complete the travel support document for reimbursement, which must include beginning and ending odometer readings and the purpose of the trip. Mileage to and/or from a residence is not reimbursable. The current state rate is 53.5 cents per mile. Please refer to the RFP detail budget category travel, page 4. The travel support document must be completed and submitted with the RFP.
Travel category lodging. South Carolina follows the GSA rate schedule for lodging. Verify appropriate lodging rates on the GSA website at www.gsa.gov at the time of the grant budget preparation. Note, rates vary by location and season. If the location for the lodging is not listed, use the default rate. If staff is sharing a room, please document that on the travel support form and corresponding lodging receipt. To receive reimbursement, the RFP must include a detailed invoice from the hotel. Grants accounting must be able to determine the daily rate to ensure compliance with GSA rates. Please refer to RFP detail budget category travel, page 5. The travel support document must be completed and submitted with the RFP.
Additional travel documentation. The documents listed on this slide must be submitted with the travel support document form in order for accounting grants to process the RFP. Process in this case means verifying support documents that list times, dates, invoices, pay statements, and other documents that you might need that have been submitted with the RFP forms, as well as checking calculations and totals.
Request for payment. Page 1 of the RFP is a summary page. Complete pages 2 through 11 as needed, then complete page 1. Request for payment summary statement, general information. Let's start at the top where you enter your agency's information. Please make sure that you enter the information that matches your vendor file that has been set up with the state of South Carolina. Next, please look at the period ending date and the grant period. For the period ending date, please enter the time frame that is covered by the RFP. For example, 1/1/2017 through 3/31/2017 for a quarterly RFP. If your agency submits monthly, then 1/1/2017 through 1/31/2017. Your grant period stays the same for the entire project period listed in your grant award. For example, a standard VOCA grant award would be October 1st, 2016 through September 30th, 2017. Please note that you are requesting payment for this period in the first 3 columns and bringing forward any prior processed RFP amounts to add to the first 3 columns to make up the information included in the last 3 columns, which are cumulative. Include the information from this RFP in your cumulative totals listed in the last 3 columns. Now let's talk about the signature line. Please make sure that the person signing page 1 of the RFP is one of the persons listed as Project Director, Financial Officer, or official authorized to sign on pages 27 and 28. Request for payment, personnel services. Please make sure you enter the agency name, the grant number, and the RFP number that you are submitting in the heading of this document. In the field period covered from to, please enter the dates of the hours actually worked, not the date of the paycheck. Please note that you must complete a summary statement for each individual grant-funded employee or an employee being used as in-kind match. Please enter the name of the employee as submitted on the notification of hire/termination form. Please remember the position title approved on page 2 of the grant. Please enter the hours worked on the project and the total hours worked in the corresponding fields. If the position is 100% grant funded, these 2 fields would be the same and the percentage worked on the project would be 100%. If the position works less than 100% of their time on the grant, please enter the approved percentage from page 2 of the grant. Please enter the base salary and fringes associated with the time frame indicated on the period covered field. Please enter the total of the previous 2 columns in the total salary and fringe column. Please enter the amount of salary for which you are requesting reimbursement, the grantor salary, and/or finally, enter the amount of this staff's salary and/or fringe benefits being used as match for the grant.
This slide shows the form you will use to list the persons funded under the grant and any changes to personnel during the grant period. Please note that the start date of the person being added to the grant or hired may not be earlier than the termination date of the person exiting.
Request for payment, contractual services page. Each category has its own summary sheet. This slide shows the detail for the budget category contractual services. Note that you will use the terminology from the approved line item in the grant. Request for payment, mileage, support detail page. Please make sure all fields on this form are completed. Please be sure that the purpose of the trip is complete. Do not use abbreviations. For example, please list enough detail information so that the grants accounting staff is able to discover why the trip was necessary to perform duties under the project. Request for payment, travel support document. Please complete a travel support document for each grant-funded staff traveling. Please start with the date column and enter each day of travel, including departure and arrival at each location, along with the times AM or PM of each departure and arrival. Under each category column, enter the total amount of the expenses related to each day of travel. For example, for each day of travel, list the meals, lodging, etc. between the departure for that day and the arrival for that day. Each day should have its own space with all of the appropriate expenses. In the last column, please indicate the amount requested for the travel-related expenses, and if applicable, the amount of cash match. Please make sure all backup documentation is attached with each travel support document to include all applicable receipts, approved training request from GEMIS, conference agenda, and any other receipts. Request for payment, equipment backup. Please list each approved equipment line item that you are submitting for reimbursement in the RFP with the corresponding information requested in the detailed budget page for equipment. Please attach all invoices, emails, approvals, state contract information, etc. to the back of this form. Request for payment, other. Please list each approved line item that you are submitting for reimbursement in the RFP with the corresponding information requested in the detailed budget page for the other category. Please attach all invoices, emails, approvals, state contract information, etc. to the back of this form. Please indicate in the last column of this form if any of the line items are subject to a percentage reduction based on page 15 of the grant. Request for payment summary page. Please see the amounts brought forward from the budget detail sheets as totals per category onto page 1 of the summary sheet.
Volunteer hours. For subgrantees that use volunteer hours for in-kind match, a cumulative volunteer hour form must be submitted with each request for payment. The cumulative form shows the total of all the hours from the individual volunteer logs. Individual volunteer logs should be kept for site monitoring review, but do not need to be submitted unless requested by the SFA. This is the cumulative volunteer log. You're going to complete the individual volunteer log and then put the totals on this form submitting with the RFP. Form must be completed in its entirety. Project director or the volunteer coordinator must sign in blue ink after the completion of the volunteer efforts at the bottom of the form. The name of the agency and the grant number may be filled in at the beginning of the grant period for ease of implementation during the project. You can copy this form numerous times and then submit it each month or quarter. All individual volunteer logs that total into the cumulative form must be available for review during a site monitoring visit. If you'll notice on this form, total hours eligibility has been increased after March 13th, 2017 to $25 an hour. Anything before March 13th will be calculated at $20 an hour. This is the individual volunteer log. Again, form must be completed in its entirety. Either the volunteer coordinator or the project director must sign, but the volunteer must also sign after the completion of the volunteer's efforts. Under direct service performed, no abbreviations. Please give accounting grants and the programmatic staff sufficient information in this direct services form area so that we can determine whether or not that service is allowable. On-call time is calculated at a third of the value of direct service time. So you would take the total on-call hours times 0.33, and that would give you the amount of total direct service hours. If you add direct service hours at $25 an hour and on-call time period at a third of $25 an hour, that gives your total eligible hours. All of the individual volunteer hours forms are then totaled onto the cumulative form.
Request for payment property control form. List items on the property control form as the equipment is received and submitted to accounting grants. Please make sure that all items with a single value of $1,000 or more are listed on this form and submitted with the RFP. The form is not complete without the signature of one of the following persons: project director, finance director, or official authorized to sign from the grant's current information on GMIS. Complete a form for equipment purchased. Send to accounting grants either prior to or with final RFP. Equipment means an article of non-expendable, tangible, personal property having a useful life of more than 1 year and an acquisition cost which equals or exceeds $1,000, including shipping cost, but not taxes. All equipment must be used exclusively for the purposes stated in the approved grant narrative and must be available for review by SCDPS personnel during site monitoring visits.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation. Refer to the contact page at the beginning if you need further clarification on any of the items presented.